David Cameron, who I already met yesterday, along with Matteo Renzi. This conference call was very useful. It enabled us to remind ourselves that the ceasefire in Syria must be adhered to everywhere. The only actions that can be tolerated are those in the fight against Daesh and al-Nusra. Any other initiative goes against that ceasefire. Another action similar to this would be a pretext to breach the ceasefire. We did realize that we had common ground on this, and in the field this is what was happening. We also wanted humanitarian aid to be provided in the best way possible to the civilian populations. They are the victims of this conflict, and they end up in situations where they don't have access to food. We therefore together decided to coordinate our initiatives and our efforts to bring to Aleppo, and not just Aleppo, the support and the aid that is required. We have also underlined this opportunity presented by the truce to ramp up discussions and to open up the process of political transition. The Russians, through Vladimir Putin, have admitted to the principle of negotiation based on the United Nations resolutions. I'm sure we will have other conference calls in the future to follow up on this transitional process. But we have a window of opportunity. It exists. This will enable us to calm the situation in the field, to make the situation as easy as possible for the Syrians, as their current existence really is very difficult, and also to kick off political dialogue that will lead to a transition that should lead to the end of a war that has claimed 300,000 lives. Our meetings are not over, but we then moved on to the refugee situation. Obviously, the two situations are tied. If we are able to solve the Syrian situation, we would also make steps towards solving the refugee crisis, without forgetting people in Jordan, Turkey, Lebanon, and also people who are refugees within Syria itself. Given the current refugee situation, France and Germany are united in wishing the answer to come through Europe. Europe must be the one able to bring answers to this crisis. Again, we were preparing the European Council on Monday, during which the Turkish Prime Minister will be present, and we did this through two principles. The Syrian refugees fleeing the war must be welcomed in countries as close as possible to their own, meaning in Turkey, in Lebanon, in Jordan. And we need to provide the support for this. And the second principle, our guiding principle, is that when these refugees arrive at the European borders, we need to make sure where they come from, what they're doing, and be sure of their rights, especially when it comes to asylum seeking. And this again underlines the importance of control of our external borders, and this is what we will talk about with Turkey and also with all of our partners. Progress has been made over the last few days because decisions have been implemented, finally. Specifically, we have NATO, which has decided to deploy its ships between Greece and Turkey in the Aegean Sea, And in fact, I would like to announce that France will contribute a vessel to this force to help support the initiative. NATO is also working with Frontex because this is Frontex's responsibility on behalf of Europe. And Turkey must be in constant communication with Frontex and with NATO to make sure that the controls are effective. In Greece, we must also guarantee oversight of the hotspots where we can identify the migrants, we can welcome those who can claim asylum, and redirect those who cannot through readmission procedures, which must be accepted by Turkey as well. We must also make funds available so that the countries that are welcoming the refugees can do this while respecting the human dignity of the refugees themselves. At the European Council, we must make sure that all of the decisions made are implemented. This means cooperation with Turkey to make sure that the border is as airtight as possible and to redirect people who cannot seek asylum. And we need to support the people who are arriving, and there are fewer people arriving than in the past. And finally, our goal is to reinstate Schengen. This requires solidarity and the reinforcement of our shared means. This is something we must establish together, the Schengen countries together, and we must set up the border controls necessary and not those set up during the summer. We must step up to the plate, implement the decisions that were made, make sure that Turkey upholds its commitments, help Turkey uphold its commitments, make sure that Greece is supported and helped thanks to European solidarity, and all of this through procedures that were established within the Schengen space. France and Germany are working with the same will, and France shall respect all of its commitments, especially when it comes to the sharing principles. I committed to welcoming 30,000 Iraqi or Syrian refugees in the summer, and we will uphold that commitment. And this is thanks to the fact that we are obeying the rules of the Schengen space, and we do not have unauthorized migrants coming in. So France will uphold its commitments, and that is the principle. All countries must uphold their commitments so that we can face the current situation. I would just like to finish up with a point that will be addressed on the 14th and also in the European Council, not the one coming up on Monday, but the following one. I'm alluding to the agricultural situation, specifically dairy producers and pork producers. They are expecting from the European Union decisions that will bind all of the European countries. Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to come and speak here in France in the run-up to the Monday European Council. It was very important that the four world leaders could meet via phone, and I would like to underline the fact that the commitment to the ceasefire is an important message, and this was underlined by the Russian president earlier. We are fighting against the al-Nusra Front and Daesh here. We also asked Russia to use its influence to make sure that these principles are also applied to the Assad regime, and we underlined the specific situation in Aleppo. We were all in agreement to say that the political process must be started as soon as possible, because this is the main condition for a transformation. Before this, we need to improve the humanitarian situation there. We have looked at ways we can improve access to humanitarian aid there, and this will be a very important message we can send to the men and women in Syria. The first progress is already visible, and we all clearly stated that we are supporting the work of Mr. de Mistura, who is guiding this political transition process and all of the groups involved. It's important to note that on the European side, we talked with the Russian president, and there is more contact between the US and Russia now. This enabled us to underline our shared responsibility in the matter, and as the President of the French Republic, François Hollande, just said, the Syrian situation is very closely linked to the European Council that will take place on Monday. What's at stake is how can we handle the refugee situation. France and Germany are in complete agreement on the necessity to protect the external borders. First of all, to protect freedom of movement within Europe, and also to be able to remove the border controls that were implemented this summer. Because we need to know who is coming into Europe, and Greece has its role to play in this, because it has the external border. It is a maritime border, and this also involves Turkey. This is why on the meeting on Monday we will meet with the Turkish head of state. We will update on the EU-Turkey agenda, work on what we can do to provide humanitarian aid to the refugees. This involves the 3 billion euros which were previously announced, and we'll also take stock of what has been done and what remains to be done to control illegal immigration. The NATO mission needs to be made operational as soon as possible, and I hope on Monday progress will have already been made. And I am delighted that France has agreed to send a vessel to support the border control mission there in the Aegean Sea, and to help with the cooperation with the Turkish Coast Guard and Frontex. We are also talking with Turkey about the potential to facilitate readmission of refugees into Turkey. We will have far-reaching debates on the European situation, because we are convinced that unilateral decisions are not what we need here. They would not enable sustainable reduction of migrant influx. The number of migrants coming into Germany has gone down, but it is in no way sustainable, because Greece is facing a much wider problem. We need to balance the situation. We need a European solution which will protect the external borders, support Greece, and do this through whatever means we can mobilize. And I hope that through our approach we will be able to push forward. We believe that what Donald Tusk is doing with his visits and also what the Commission is doing are vital to this. We also talked about agriculture in France and in Germany. This is a hot-button topic. We are concerned by the situation for our farmers, and our agricultural ministers are working together to come up with shared solutions that we can present to the Commission, and this is very important and an important message for the farmers.